You may be wondering, Halloween, what did you actually think of Amnesia Machine for Pigs? A load of you have asked me what if I can do my final thoughts on the game after I finished, and so here we go. This is a special case. I don't normally review the games, the LPs, directly after I do them, because it's still a bit fresh and I haven't had time to sort of go over it, but I've been thinking about this a lot, really. And Amnesia is quite, not only an important game to me, quite a sort of a polarising one to the community as well as a whole. A Dark Descent was a very, very good horror game, and I thought it was a very strong entry into a new brand of horror, sort of a very sort of visceral, but it made you feel quite defenceless. It built on what Black Plague had done beforehand, the Penumbra games. This, on the other hand, I don't feel really did that at all. So let's sort of go over it from the beginning. I think let's start with how it looks and feels, really. Aesthetically, Amnesia succeeds in quite a few. Okay, A Machine for Pigs. I can't say Amnesia; they're both the same. A Machine for Pigs succeeds in quite a few areas. Like graphically, I think it builds slightly upon A Dark Descent. It looks slightly better. The environment's a bit cleaner. Overall, everything looks a little bit higher res. It's okay, it looks quite nice. The monsters themselves, while I'm not actually that impressed with, there are a few things I do like. From sort of the torso down, they look like the monsters from Alexander's Castle, which makes sense if you look into the notes. Daniel seems to be his great grandfather or great great uncle or something, and he probably took notes of how they used to look. And I think he got himself one of the old monsters from the castle to sort of study. I like that. That's sort of aesthetically pleasing. It looks really good. The rest of the pig monster, not so much, but I'll go over that in a minute. The rest of the environments are interesting looking. To the game's credit, I think the machine does look quite neat. The environments are cool. What they do with some of the environments is very, very neat in general, like the sort of expanding maze-like structure to them, the sort of opening more passageways, and generally the sort of atmosphere that comes with it. You really do feel like you're descending into this great sort of leviathan of a machine, this sort of eldritch abomination that has grown underneath London. It's very neat. I keep saying neat. It's very cool. Yeah, it's going to be cool for a bit. Steamy. Yes, exciting. So that's really good. On the flip side, let's go with the things I don't like about the aesthetics, and there are quite a few. There's a lot of effects in the game that look crap. The sort of fog and the volumetric light and fog effects are shite. All they do is clog up stuff. There's a lot of blurring effects that do nothing to add to the game except make everything look irritating, and just it doesn't disorientate the player. It just means you can't see shit, which just gets very, very sort of aggravating. Let's see, the actual monsters themselves, barring the sort of neat throwback to Amnesia or Dark Descent, it's just poor. The pig monsters themselves don't look very frightening. They look odd at the best times. I mean, you could go creepy, perhaps. Perhaps they wanted to go for a sort of more sad look to the monsters. A sort of this is a human that's been horribly butchered look to them. That I could understand. That's fair enough. But I think generally they failed at making a scary monster. You are not scared of the pigs. There's nothing to be frightened of. They are just sort of walking bacon. It's a metaphor gone too far, and perhaps they wanted to really play onto the title or go from there, I don't know. But either way, the pig monster I feel was a mistake. Didn't really add any scares there. There's nothing really to be terrified of a pig. It's a pig at the end of the day. I mean, sure, I've been bitten by a pig in real life. It kind of hurts, actually, but I'm not particularly terrified of pigs. Maybe if there were giant wasps, that would be pretty scary. But that's another thing. Oh, there was something I did like. Let's just to add to that. The way the lights flickered, actually, when the pig monster's around, reacting to the chemical inside them, the compound X. Very, very cool. Nice touch. Good stuff. Okay, so let's get around to some of the other aesthetics that were pretty poor. While the machine looked fantastic, the environments were extremely samey at times, although the same could be said of A Dark Descent. It doesn't necessarily disorientate you, but, sometimes it is a little bit, everything is the same, and I'd have liked a few more of the sections where things look different when you turn around. You did something, and then suddenly the corridor has grown behind you. Now, is that your character going nuts? Or is that the machine building new corridors? You don't really know. It's kind of creepy and keeps it sort of out there a bit. That's really neat. I like that. That was cool. Neat, cool, yeah. He's in his words. I'm going to make a tally. Yeah, make a drinking game to it. Take a shot every time I say neat. You'll all be dead by the time I'm 5 minutes in. Either way, it was a very nice touch. I like that. That was cool. Cool. Then again, they needed to do that more. That was a missed opportunity. So yeah, aesthetically, I feel the game failed more than it achieved. It took too much from Amnesia. It really smelt and whiffed of an Amnesia mod as opposed to a separate game unto itself. That was problematic. I have no problem with building upon what was already there, but too much of what was there felt like it was from the same. This is Amnesia 1.5. You've lifted from Dark Descent directly. While using the same engine, you really could have gone with something a bit different, I feel. There was too much reuse of assets. It's a shame. It really is a shame. I feel they could have done that better. Alright, so aesthetically, I've sort of, that this is obviously very subjective, I feel it didn't work particularly well in a lot of points, but some of you may do. But obviously this is my opinion, not yours, so this is why I'm yapping and you're not. What else? Let's think. Let's move on to sound design. Now, one thing I will credit the game for, the voice acting, barring the kids, let's be honest, they're crap, is absolutely superb. The guy playing Mandus, very, very cool. His voice acting is really well timed, well rehearsed. He delivers his lines absolutely perfectly and spot on. He really is very good, and props to him. The machine itself, the engineer, whatever you want to call him, or it was neat. I keep saying neat. I need some new words. Someone give me a thesaurus. His voice acting once again was fantastic. The professor, some of the other people, the pig noises, all very good. I have no qualms with that at all. No problems. Overall, the voices, barring the children, was absolutely spot on. Really, really enjoyed them. Really added to it. One negative there wasn't enough voice acting, especially on the notes. The notes were very, very, very wordy, almost for the sake of it. It's metaphor after metaphor after metaphor. Just really sort of junked up when you're trying to read. It's kind of annoying. Now, I read it out, which was a bit irritating. Obviously, not all of you have done. You probably just read it in your head. But they could have done with them being narrated, I think, by Mandus. Especially with a voice talent as good as his, it's a bit of a shame to sort of squander that opportunity not to have that. I really do. I think that's a missed opportunity there. Otherwise, sound design was fine. Like, the pig noises were cool. The machine really felt like a groaning, hugeless leviathan under the ground. It really felt the rumbles and the shakes and the bangs of it. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. Really good sound design overall. I expect nothing less from a horror game, and it delivered on almost every front. Everything sounded creepy. Neat. Neat. Really gotta stop saying neat. I'm gonna put attack and I'm gonna smash my fist into it. Everything really did sound as it should have done. The only problem, again, this feeds back to the pigs not being scary. The pig noises aren't particularly scary, but they're pigs. Squealing isn't, that worrying. Yeah. Alright, so sound design absolutely succeeded. Brilliant. No problems. Let's move on to the gameplay, and this is where it falls apart completely. Amnesia the Dark Descent had minimalistic gameplay at the best times anyway. There were some puzzles and a lot of interaction, but generally it was without sounding rude to the game, a glorified haunted house simulator, perhaps. It's a spooky game that you don't have an awful lot of control over, but it has a lot of control over you, and it sort of, you can influence small things, but that's enough. There's enough influence there and enough sort of things to do that you don't feel like you're just being led around by the tie and someone's dragging you around. You can hide in closets, you can open up things, you can throw potatoes around, you can molest various objects, including the monsters, if they're around, that kind of thing. There was enough interaction in the Dark Descent to keep it fresh and interesting. On the flip side, with a machine for pigs, you have absolutely minimal interaction at all. It's if a Dark Descent feels like a haunted house ride, then Machine for Pigs is a haunted house ride. You are going exactly where the game tells you at all times. You may not touch anything, keep your hands inside the ride at all times, and do not look beyond what is in front of you. It really is a problem. The fact you're taking away so many things to play around with is irritating at best. Why can I not manipulate objects like I could? That was half the fun. Why can I not hide from the pigs? The pigs are all scripted to the sense that they appear, you move around them, there's no hiding from them, they're just in the area. I think they are the Metal Gear Solid genome guards. They just are there, you walk around them, you move on, they disappear. Okay, the ones in the Dark Descent just disappeared after a while, which was a problem, but still better than what we had here, which really was no interaction at all. They were just glorified set pieces that you moved through bit by bit. Now, you may say, Halloween, that's okay, that's not what they were going for. They wanted to go for a storyboard kind of game, and that's okay, but then you have to remember you are making a sequel to a game which has these previous things. It's a shame if you take away features rather than add features. Losing the inventory was sad. It's nice to have an inventory in a horror game, even if it is to collect your stuff, just to keep track of things, perhaps. It also helps make puzzles more in-depth. There are barely any puzzles in the Machine for Pigs, whereas Amnesia Dark Descent had quite a few. There's basically no interaction. You don't have to do that much backtracking, if any, because there's no need to. You're being led along an assembly line, so to speak. None of these things are positives. Losing the sanity system, the one thing that Daniel didn't like was the dark for various reasons, which you find out during the game. And taking that away, or even not implementing a similar system, perhaps was a mistake. Now, not every character is going to be afraid of the dark, I understand that, but you can't take away such a big feature. The dark in Amnesia is meant to scare you, because that's when the monsters arrive, and you can't look at the monsters. In this, looking at the monsters doesn't matter. Man just doesn't give a flying fart about the monsters. For better, for worse, that's a part of his character. That's fine, but again, you have to add something in there then. That what makes me afraid of these pigs? What makes me afraid of these monsters? Think of Penumbra, right? It's the first time the demon dog turns up in a Penumbra with its glowing eyes and sort of half-rotted face. It's a hell of a lot scarier because you can't really look at it. Because the second you do, it's Phil, isn't it? Phil starts chattering. He starts freaking out, and the dog will hear him, which will get you killed, which is frightening. In this, you can just kind of watch the pig, wait till it turns around, run past him. It doesn't really matter. You can run. They just give up chase after a little bit anyway. Doesn't, makes no odds. I don't like that. I really don't. I know that's not what they were going for. They wanted to go for their sort of interactive story, but it didn't work. The gameplay suffered for it, and as such, the game on top suffered for it. There's nothing wrong with visual novels. There's nothing wrong with telling a story, but when you're building on an existing franchise which already had these things, that's where the problems come in. If they took away the Amnesia focus of this and went with something else, it would work a hell of a lot better, and it would stand on its own two legs. But because it doesn't, I have to judge it as an Amnesia game, and that means I am disappointed in it. A Machine for Pigs standalone would have been an interesting tale of a man who'd gone crazy. They would have been good. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but because I'm constantly comparing it to Amnesia, the Dark Descent, I feel it's doing not only the Amnesia series as a whole disservice, but you're doing a Machine for Pigs a disservice, because you're getting judged on something that perhaps you shouldn't be. I am judging your game on a previous entry, where perhaps that isn't fair on your game. Your game cannot live up to the expectations, because your game is not is not really the same. You've taken away so much that you're giving me a glorified storyboard, when before what I had was a horror puzzle survival game. Now I have a essentially on rails Ghost Train with a story to it, which again is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but it just doesn't work when you're comparing it to Amnesia. Okay, let's go some over that. I've harangued the poor game enough on that. A few more gameplay features that were missing. Obviously, not having a health system is a bit of a shame, because you can't really... Because the enemies essentially, what you have to realise here, the enemies don't matter. The enemies are irrelevant. The enemies are just another obstacle that someone's plonked in a creator just to sit there and be slightly irritating for a while. Think of all the enemy placements. They really don't matter. You're there for all of 2 seconds. They don't really add to the scares. They don't really add to anything. You just have to sort of dance around them a little bit and move on. Fair enough. Whereas the enemies in sort of a Dark Descent were an additional obstacle that you had to sort of work around and with. If you took damage, you would lose your health. That means you have to sort of manage your inventory and manage your health a bit better than you would. If you keep getting hurt, what are you doing wrong? And I have to change my gameplay style. In this, I could just peg past them. I could just ignore them. It doesn't really matter. That's not particularly good on what we're going for here, I don't think. Which is a shame. But enough shitting on the game for gameplay. Obviously, the game does not hold up on gameplay at all. It really doesn't. Especially compared to its prequel. As a gameplay, the game is poor. It really is. There's not anything to it. Which means, as a game, it fails on gameplay alone. You may argue differently, but I feel, as in the genre it was aiming for, and the audience it was aiming for, and sort of the expectations it was aiming for, it fails completely. There are good points to the gameplay. The set pieces are done fairly well. I do enjoy them, but that's not what we're going for here. It's a mistake. Plain and simple. Alright, moving on. The last point, perhaps, and probably the most important to this Amnesia, is the story. Now, the story in this game kicks the 7 shits out of the first game. It really does. A Machine for Pigs story is brilliant. There's a lot of subtlety to it, there's a lot of intricacies to it, and there's a lot of sort of mystery to it, which is great. A Dark Descent had all this too, but I just feel A Machine for Pigs gave a stronger narrative, which makes sense. The Chinese Room speciality is to do narrative in their games, like Dear Esther and things. A Machine for Pigs succeeds greatly in the story. A nice little touch, Ozymandias, the King of Kings, blah blah blah. It's a nice touch on the main character there. I like that. That's pretty cool. Nice little reference. Look upon my works, ye mighty in despair. He's made a gigantic machine the world is going to fear. So going for the top, basically, let's knock down the game. This man goes into a Mayan temple, discovers that he can summon a god through blood rituals. He also gets visions on the sort of world wars that will come and kill his children. He sees that his children in the future will die. This is obviously not a nice thing. He sees all these visions of the world splitting the atom, a nuclear weapon going off, all this kind of thing. It is horrifying. He can't take it. He doesn't like it. So he saves his children the agony of the world war, the mustard gas, and being shot to death by killing them, I hope relatively painfully, and cutting out their hearts. And using that to sort of bring this being initially into life and splitting his soul. He then comes back to London and builds this colossal machine underground in his factory. The factory is a front for the machine. The factory itself processes live beings into. It's basically a gigantic sacrificial machine. Man discovers that the ancient Mayans had an idea. They were sacrificing people to stop the world ending or to stop calamities happening, but they just couldn't do it with enough efficiency. They couldn't get enough people there. So he makes a machine, a conveyor belt, a machine born just to slaughter and to sacrifice to a god. He basically, he gives birth to a god, which is essentially a part of him. His soul is split here. He wants to make the world a better place so that no one may suffer, so no world wars will happen. He will control the masses. He will control the pigs, and the machine for pigs. It makes sure, I suppose, that everyone is in line with what they should be doing. Somewhere along the line, the machine decided that the world wasn't worth saving, and instead just slaughtered the lot of them because there is no redeeming this world, and the machine will change the world to suit him, I suppose. That's the general rundown of the story, and then you wake up. Mandus decides this is horrible, sabotages the machine, and then tries to commit suicide. Gets electrocuted, I believe. Wakes up, and there we go. You've got the start of the game, and then you go from there, where he finds out that the machine is talking to him to try and re-enable itself. In doing so, ends up unleashing hordes of pigs on London, and blah 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 blah. Ends up dying, murdering the machine. There is your story in a nutshell. Now, in that, you have a lot of notes, a lot of intricacies and sort of subtlety to it. The story itself is told through not only narration but the notes and the actual visual sort of side of things. That's done very, very well. It's not a particularly scary story at all. It's unsettling and a lot of body horror. I feel the story works well. I think it's a very interesting narrative. 3.5 hours is pretty short, mind you, but then it's a glorified mod, so I don't know what I was expecting there really. So yeah, that's no problems there with the story. The notes I went over earlier, the notes were great, could have been voice acted, would have been better. There are too many stop-starts in the story because you have to keep reading it to keep up with it. If the player decided just to ignore the notes, they're not going to have a clue what's going on. That's not necessarily a fault on the game, but because the sheer quantity of crappy, notes that just throws after you text after text after text, it can be a little bit much, probably for some players. It wasn't for me, obviously, I don't mind. I have no problems with that, but I feel that could have been improved slightly. Overall, I have absolutely zero problems with the story. It really did work well. I liked it. I liked the ending. I liked the beginning. It was okay. No problems at all. Trying to think really. I mean, that's its biggest selling point is a story, and they crafted a good story. Fair play to them. It's not my favourite gaming story at all, but it's a serviceable one. It works, and you can go through it. I feel it does work better than The Dark Descent. Not by a huge amount, mind you, but it certainly does. The story is very solid. Mandus is a sympathetic character who has obviously done some terrible things, and I suppose an anti-hero perhaps. He's done these dreadful things, yet you can sort of sympathise and you go along with these things and sort of root for the character, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, you guys saw the story as it went along. I don't need to sort of clarify too much more than that, other than the fact I feel it did work and it was a very good effort on the story's part. Alright, so overall, generally speaking, it squandered any attempt it could. There was many opportunities to make a lot of scares in the game. I could easily go and think of a few situations where you could add either noises or quick visuals or anything, or just to add some tension to the game, which it horribly lacks. There really is no fear of anything in the game, and that's that along with just the gaping holes in the gameplay really is problematic. As to whether I'd recommend it anyone playing it, either who has seen all the LP or hasn't seen the LP, yeah, I'd say it's worth playing. It's if you forget it's an Amnesia title and take it at its own merit, it's a game that's worth playing. It really is. It's unique. It's certainly a unique ghost. It's a unique Ghost Train. You know, a Ghost Train, may it be shallow as that is in terms of gameplay, the story's enough to carry it for the most part. And while silly in points and some of the stuff perhaps doesn't work very well, it's worth playing. It really is. So yeah, pick it up, have a look, see what you think. It's a disappointment compared to Amnesia. A Dark Descent. It is a disappointment compared to a Dark Descent. But in its own merit, it's worth a look. It's not the best horror game I've ever played, but it's not the worst horror game I've ever played. It's a strong story, but weak gameplay. So it's whether that's important to you or not, whether you're happy to accept an interesting story compared to, say, a game with stronger gameplay and puzzles in it. And that's just sort of your trade-off here. It did squander a lot of opportunity to do good things right. It used too much of a previous title. It didn't need the previous title's name, quite frankly. It was a mistake to use it as Amnesia, but it wasn't a mistake to release it, and it was a decent game overall. I don't give numbers out, but like I said, I would say have a look. I would say not at full price. It's too short. It's not worth the money at full price. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I suppose in conclusion, if you want to play a decent Amnesia game, you don't play a Machine for Pigs, you play a Dark Descent. It's a better game overall in almost every aspect. Almost every aspect. That's pretty much, that's what I had to say. So I hope you enjoyed my elaboration there, and yeah. Oh, Castlevania Saturday starts tomorrow. It's going to be it'll be Order of Ecclesia and probably another Judgment run. Why not? Let's see if we can get that running. Yeah, please let me know what you thought of my views and what you think of your own views, and put them in there, please. I'll certainly enjoy reading your own thoughts on the game, especially those of you who have played at the end and everything. So, thanks for listening, guys, and until next time.